Welcome everybody to the August 2021 Women IT Pros APAC call. Thank you all for joining us. Jess and I once again can't believe how quickly this week comes around at the end of every month. So we do appreciate the time to get together and chat with you. So if you don't know who I am, Sonia Cuff, Senior Client Advocate for Microsoft, along with my amazing co-host, Jess Dodson. Say hi, Jess.
Hi, Jess. Jess Dodson, customer engineer within Microsoft. And this month, we are very, very lucky to have some guest speakers along as well. So the topic for conversation today was all about careers and how people got where they are, and the fact that being an IT pro is one of those really weird kind of career paths where you kind of fall into it. It's not often that people put their head in the air and go, yeah, that's what I want to be. So a lot of the people that we've got on the call today have kind of fallen into their role. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat. So I think we might kick off. Lena, I'm going to be annoying and poke you.
Yeah, that's good.
How did you get into where you are now, and what are you doing now, and what path did you take?
Sure. All right. Currently, I am also a customer engineer, just like Jess. We do very similar things. We both work in identity and security. The path I took to get here, though, it was a little bit roundabout. So when I finished high school, I was like, yep, IT, that's my thing. I want to do that. I started uni and then promptly failed 3 out of 4 subjects in the first semester. And it turns out that I'm not great at programming, calculus and algebra and those kind of things. So I did the first year and then kind of slogged on, did the second year and repeated half of that first year. I took a year off to try to get some direction because clearly university was not working out too well for me at that point. And when I came back, I ended up doing a psychology degree. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. So post psychology degree, but to become a qualified psychologist, you actually need to do additional studies. And by then I was kind of jack of studying. I didn't want to hear about it, do it. I sit another exam ever again. I was done. So I spent a bit of time working at Coles, a couple of small businesses, tried a few things. And then I had a friend on the Gold Coast ping me and say, hey, look, I've got a job in a call center and they need more call center people. And that was working for a telecoms company also who just opened up to doing internet services. So I started there. It was all on the job training, all learning about how internet things work, modems, networking, that kind of stuff. A couple of years there, and then somebody that I knew was working in the Queensland government and said, hey, our level 1 IT help desk is looking for people. Would you be interested? And that's how I ended up going into government. I started on the level 1 help desk there, tried a few different things, desktop support, doing second level support, all of those kind of things. And then a opportunity came up in the sysadmin team, and I thought, why not? It's a pay rise, I'll give it a go. And it turns out that I wasn't too bad at that. So I got the job there as a sysadmin and did a whole bunch of things. They're learning about, at that point, it was all Novell NetWare stuff. So
I like the way that you're like, I did a whole bunch of things.
Well, I did. I mean, how do you describe it? Like, you're a sysadmin, right? You're all of the things. You're not one thing. You're everything,
We're almost catchers, yeah.
Yeah. So I learned about, I guess it's not just the IT side. There was a lot of people management in there, expectation management, and particularly from the call center days, dealing with people who didn't have their expectations met after they've been waiting for 2 hours to speak to you, so there was a lot of people skills there. So after a while in government, I moved to a different department, changed levels, tried being a team leader for a little bit, so I discovered that was definitely not my thing. I am not a team leader at that point anyway. And then went into private sector for a bit. So jumped there and started doing cybersecurity consulting, which was really literally just taking all of the sysadmin skills that I'd picked up along the way and telling other people how to do that. And from there, Microsoft advertised, and I went, oh, hey, I should try. And now I'm here. So that's kind of how I got here. The thing I think that's really important to note, though, is I've got a psychology degree. It's not particularly relevant. I don't have very many certificates in IT. I haven't really sat a lot of exams. All of my knowledge has been from other people who've been there and done it, or things that I've learned along the way, major incidents, and you learn a lot in those. So yeah. So that was kind of my journey to get to where I am now as a customer engineer, and looking forward to getting out there and doing things with my customers, and in a sense continuing what I've already been doing, which is teaching them how to do their things better, to a better standard. Yep.
So there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I want to pick up on, because I love how relevant they are. The first thing is the people aspect of our jobs.
Yeah.
And I think maybe more so than, because my perception of software development is it's very much sitting at my computer writing code, right? It's not a thing that I'm particularly interested in. I do it when I need to, but it's not the thing that I love to be doing. But I do wonder how many developers or how many people that come into the industry through programming languages and then go into application coding, I don't know that they get the same opportunities as we do to hone those people skills. And I'm not suggesting for 1 second that they're the kind of people that should be locked away in a back room just doing coding, because we have amazing community-minded developers who go out and speak and consult and are great people as well. But I just think, especially if any part of your IT career, especially in the early days, involves having to deal with people when things aren't working.
So I think that's a really important skill, because I think that first couple of years in a call center, your job's the phone, so that took away the dislike of being on the phone, but also helps. The other part of that is there's time limits. Your calls have to be done within set amount of time, so you get really good at getting to the point, getting the information you need, but also being professional and polite about it too. So, and I think that first level technical support gets really underrated. It's not just the skills you learn in terms of tech, but it's also the skills you pick up in terms of people, and how to get the answers you need and ask the right questions and that sort of thing.
Yep. And the other disconnect I see is, I think a lot of people that I talk to who are in IT careers, especially if they're quite senior in their careers, we all sort of have different paths where we come into this industry. We might not have any formal qualifications, or we might have gone down a path of getting formal qualifications that aren't relevant to the IT roles that we're now doing. And it frustrates me when I see IT roles advertised where they do set quite a high bar for qualifications in terms of, you must have this particular bachelor or whatever, because I know a lot of people that are working quite successfully in the industry don't have those qualifications and didn't sort of go down that path in their education career, if at all. I mean, my own journey, I got into IT because of the workplace I was working for. So I was on the business side of the business, and got into IT through the employer with no formal qualifications. So, I hope that if anybody in the call gets to a position where they become a hiring manager, if that's what you want to do, that you're just mindful of that when you go out and look for staff. Because I think quite often when we see vacancies advertised like that, we discount ourselves from applying because we don't have those qualifications. We're quite often, even if you do go and apply for those roles and can talk about your experience with people and that sort of problem management, you are in for a good show as well. Simone actually asked a question about how do you jump from one industry into IT, saying that she used to work in hospitality and wants to get into IT but not sure how to get started. This is a really interesting question for me, and I'm going to open it to anybody to answer, because as I said, there are these serendipitous moments if you are working for an organisation where there's an opportunity to dip your toe in the water in their IT environment. But if you're not really in that part of the business, we look at, a lot of the computer science stuff at uni to me seems more coding than it is infrastructure based. We do have, the certificate falls here in Australia in information technology, which may be a learning path you could go down. There may be entry level roles that are advertised, especially those sort of junior help desk roles that are more open to people who are just getting started in their career. Is anybody else? Before I stop talking, I am also going to put a link in the chat to the Microsoft Australia traineeship program. So if you don't know about this, we run this amazing program at Microsoft Australia for trainees coming new to industry, and part of that is getting your Cert 4. We put you with a partner. There's an application process, and that was something I didn't even know existed. I'm used to intern programs as far as graduates go, but we actually have this whole other Microsoft traineeship program as well that I've put a link to, and I'll add to the YouTube recording as well. So anybody else in the panel, have you got any sort of suggestions for people, especially if you've come from a career that wasn't tech?
I mean, look, my first job was going from retail into tech, and it was call center. So it was a good kind of gateway, I think, because it went from being partially retail, because you're still dealing with people, but it was definitely tech because that was the core service that we provided.
Yeah, I've hired a few industry changes, and the biggest thing is just having the passion for it. So, we talk a lot in tech about having a passion for it, but particularly when you're getting into those entry level roles, it's really important to have be able to display that this is something that you're really excited to be learning about. One of the guys that I hired was like Melina was a call center operator, but for a much more difficult call center. He worked at Lifeline as a volunteer, and he, in his spare time when he was not on calls, he was fixing the computers for the other call center staff. And when he applied for the job, it was immediately clear to me that he had all the people skills, the technical stuff he was starting to dip his toes in, and he was just absolutely hungry for it. And he turned out to be one of the best staff I've ever employed. He's gone on to have a really good career as a sysadmin. I've also had the privilege of being a mentor to some of the first group of our Microsoft traineeship program candidates, and it's really valuable. Can definitely confirm.
And like other people, I've worked with people who've come off that help desk, so it really was seen as the entry level for all things IT for a number of years. So one of the guys that came from the help desk and came into my DBA team where I was at the time, he's gone on to great things. He's now with Microsoft. He's been with Microsoft for longer than I have been, and he loves it. And it was that passion that got him from the help desk into my team where we were working together previously. And he then took that career, ran away to England for a couple of years, came back to Australia, and then he had it as a mission to work for Microsoft. And he's not the first person I know who works here who has had that mission. Certainly was never a mission for mine, but it was for a number of people. And if that's your goal, there will always be a way to do it. It's just a matter of how you do it.
And it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the whole, it's that how you approach it. So I'm in the process of interviewing for some roles, and it's showing that you're willing, if you're in that entry level job, so if you're doing service desk or help desk or even call center work, it's showing that you're wanting to take that next step from there, that you're interested, that you're trying to find a mentor, that you're trying to learn more, that you're wanting to be involved more. That's probably one of the bigger things when you're making that next step up that I've noticed. Like, you're not stagnating, you're learning more, you're trying to find more information, trying to find what your passion is and what interests you.
Yeah. And Simone, good to see that you're dipping your toes into the MS Learn stuff, because there's so much in there and so much that gets updated more and more and all the time. And even now, I recommend that to people. So when I've been out working with clients, if they haven't been on MS Learn for a while, I say go and check it out, because there's always something new there.
And I mean, certs, they do help. So
Yeah.
if you're career changing, I'm not, I'm obviously not the kind of person that likes to sit exams and get certs, as I've highlighted already. But, you know, if your career changing and you're wanting to change industries entirely, getting that first step of getting some of the foundational certs off your own back, use the free vouchers, get it in there, and then that shows already that you're willing to learn and you're willing to do the study that requires to get that cert.
Yes, much like Melina, when I got to university, I realised it was not for me, primarily because of the software development focus. I, though, started tinkering in tech from a really young age, and I actually did, once I got denied entry to the military, did decide I wanted to be in IT for a living, but got a bit mucked up by my high school not providing us with tertiary entrance scores, and so I did a year in TAFE before university, and I actually think it was far more valuable than university was for the profession that I ended up in, which was Windows sysadmin. And most of the hands-on stuff I had done or dabbled in before, but they also taught a lot of, you know, writing skills. We did role plays to learn interpersonal skills, and that's something that university never would have bothered with. You know, it was the expectation when you turn up to university is you already know how to do most of that stuff that should have been taught to you in high school or whatever, which it's not, as we all know. And it was much more about, you know, being good at maths, being able to develop software. So I quit after a year and a half and went and worked for a startup with some of the technical friends that I made at TAFE and went from there. So I've done this, that and everything. I got as high as a deputy CIO and decided that was crap and decided to come back to technical stuff. Yep. Because who wants to write strategy when you can be, you know, tinkering with cool tech all the time?
Totally relate to the value of it. Like, I also did TAFE for a couple of years after leaving high school. I actually did a traineeship. You were talking about traineeships before, Sonia, and I did a traineeship for 2 years and basically worked in 6 different areas of an IT department and did a Cert 4. And it was one of the most valuable experiences of my life, because when else in your life do you get to experience so many different areas of IT? Usually you just like pick an area and you go and specialize, and then maybe you don't switch fields for like another few years. But doing a traineeship was so valuable. And I got lots of mentorship and just sitting beside people and like being a sponge and absorbing all of their knowledge was absolutely amazing. Like, you really can't understate the value of sitting down beside a more seasoned professional and just asking them questions about their career journey and technical stuff, all kinds of things, and just absorbing all of that knowledge. And all of that stuff that I learned back in like 2012, I still use it every single day because it's foundational for my career. Like things like, how does a network work? How do you maintain a PABX for VoIP IP systems? How do you patch and orchestrate updates to a massive fleet of servers? Like, how do you provide servers for business systems? Like, all of this support, and not to mention help desk. Help desk is like the most underrated role in IT. I wouldn't be surprised if like most people have done help desk at some point, and it seems like super basic, but actually it's really difficult sometimes. And I think it teaches you a lot of really important communication skills. So yeah, don't ever don't ever frown upon someone for going down the help desk route.
I was going to say, who here has worked help desk?
I went straight to second level support, but it's still support.
It's still support. And I think having that grounding and having that initial sort of step in and understanding the systems that you're working with and getting that bigger picture of the business is probably the most important thing you can do when you're looking at going into tech, because you have a broader experience of everything that's going on and you're speaking directly to the customer, and it makes you realize that in IT, we are in customer support. That is our job. We're there to help our customers, our users, be able to use the tech that they have. Like there's no hiding in a cave anymore. We're there to enable customers. That's our job.
And yet the help desk stuff that I did was close to nearly a decade into my career. So unlike other people, I actually did do a degree that was related to computing. I did not do an IT degree because they didn't exist when I went through uni. So I've actually got a Bachelor of Business in Computing and Management Information Systems. I decided to do this on a whim in year 12 because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Didn't think computers were going to be going anywhere. And despite the fact that I hadn't touched a computer since year 10, and before year 10, when I did a one term, so like 8 weeks of computing, I hadn't touched a computer since year 4. So I decided to go into computing with no experience. I was not a big computer gamer. We didn't have a computer in the house nor a gaming console at any time growing up. I thought, yeah, that sounded like a good idea. So off I went to uni for 3 years and learned all about how to program, how to code, how to build databases. And a lot of it was just logical from my perspective. And so when we were being taught how to design databases to third normal form, my brain just went click, I'm in third normal form. I didn't have to go through the process of it. My brain just did it. So funnily enough, after a number of years of coding and playing around, I wound up in a DBA role and stayed in DBA space for some time, playing around with both SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, Ingress, and I know I'm missing some, but I've played around with all of the different databases. And from there, played around in Canberra for a long time. Coming to Microsoft was a little bit different potentially from other people. So Microsoft had just announced 2 new regions opening up in Canberra. And I've got a couple of friends who were working for Microsoft at the time. One I mentioned previously came up from the help desk, and another one who had come across from South Australia with the intention of working with Microsoft in Canberra. So they both had left where I was working with them, both working with Microsoft. And I caught up with one of them after the Azure Regions launch and just went, this is where I'm at in my world. And all I caught up with them for was the intention of catching up. And by the end of that conversation, it was, we might be looking for someone at the moment. You've got any interest? Yeah, probably, because I'm not really happy where I am. Okay, sure, throw your hat in the ring. So I did. Now, to be fair, all that contact got me was an interview. I still had to go through the same interview process anyone who applied cold did, but it was just that my name got to the top of that interview list. So that was the only benefit I got through having contacts. They are good if you've got them, but you don't have to have them to come in. I know a large number of people who've come into Microsoft without that, and I know that will continue. But yeah, if you do have a contact, I'm not going to say don't work it.
Funny story,
I just want to pause you on that one for a minute, because I do want to come back to the how you get into Microsoft. But I also just want to come back to that conversation we were talking about education and curriculum, because Willis has asked in the chat, what support can we provide to the younger generation to foster that interest in technology? I have a year 11 niece who has an interest in cybersecurity and comp sci and want to encourage her as much as we can. There's also that generational gap and younger ones not wanting to be told what to do. I think this is a fascinating conversation, especially when we talk about encouraging people more into the IT pro aspects, including things like security, from more than just a code security perspective, especially when I see my daughter in high school and the curriculum that she works through, which is mostly coding based. I would love if someone could rewrite the school curriculum to include more infrastructure stuff. I can't see it happening, but I think we've got to come up with a way of making infrastructure interesting for the younger generation. And it comes back to when I got into IT, I was sat down by a more experienced person who wrote up on a whiteboard how TCP IP addressing works. And I think sometimes, I think we owe it to the younger generation to make sure that they're getting that foundational knowledge. I wrote a blog post explaining CIDR notation, because it's one of those things that when you come up with it, you're like, how the heck does this work? And yet it's really foundational to that whole IP addressing and subnetting. But the challenge is, how do we make that interesting, right? Because I think when younger people go into a classroom and they're set a task to build a game, or at the moment my daughter's doing stuff in Unity for VR, I'm like, okay, so how do we make TCP/IP addressing interesting? Maybe I need to set them a task of showing them how to build a server that's protected by networks that we're going to run Minecraft on. I don't know what the answer is, but I think we've got to collectively figure out a way to make infrastructure interesting for the people that want to learn it, because it did click for me. I liked the problem solving aspects of it more. And the other thing that I see, especially from the girls in her year, they don't want to take tech as a subject at school, because their perception of it is you sit down with a screen of code, it doesn't work, and you have to figure out why. And that to them is what technology is. And I'm like, no, there's all this other stuff. Like, seriously, let us do a careers fair for you and show you all of the other different, paths and roles in technology. I think hackathons, in terms of like the capture the flag stuff, is becoming more accessible in that younger age group as well. So especially if she's got an interest in the security side of things. Capture the flags to me are a little bit daunting, and Jess, you might have an opinion on this, because I go, oh my gosh, I don't think I could ever do that. Like, I know the basics of security, but I'm just like, okay, so like where would I even start? So that they are a little bit daunting to me. I don't know whether anybody's running any intro to security, like basic level capture the flag stuff.
I've seen a couple of the basic ones. So there are some that I know are run for either very junior, or I know a lot of women who are not sort of in the red team or hacker space, particularly from a blue team perspective, who are a little bit concerned about doing some CTFs because they feel they don't have the experience. So there are actually women-only CTFs as well that I know are run, so that you don't feel kind of like that pressure to perform in front of some of the guys, which I know a lot of some of the younger women certainly do feel. So seeing those spaces open up is really nice. I love the idea of the CTFs. I've been involved in a couple, and it's amazing how much you actually do know from a blue teamer's perspective, because it's literally just turning it on its head. You know how you defend it, so you kind of flip it on its head in how you would get access to that. So it's actually really, really cool. But trying to get into cybersecurity, I think, is a really interesting one. I don't know of too many people who have gone, I want to do cybersecurity, that's what I want to do. It's, you kind of fallen into it. At least I know I have.
Yeah, I think
that's one of the reasons why I was volunteering with the CSIRO program that gets IT pros into schools, because, particularly girls from even as early as year 3 and 4 are already saying that they don't want to do science and technology because that's boys' stuff, right? And I know from my own experience that all of the focusing on software development stuff was of no interest. And it wasn't until, seeing stuff about robotics and the space applications of IT ops that I really decided that's what I wanted to do. And so the point of doing that was to try and get a wider experience of, the different roles that do exist in IT, so that they're not just thinking, oh, I'm going to end up, sitting behind a keyboard for my whole life, wearing a black hoodie, because that's all the pictures that they see. Yes, I know many of you are. It's all the security people. And that was eye-opening, because at year 3-4 level, it's 50-50 girls and boys, and then year 5-6 it's vastly skewed towards boys, but at least then they've had a visible female in IT in their life at some stage, so they can think back on it and go, hey, actually, yeah, I do know a woman.
Yeah, that visibility is a really huge thing too, I think, particularly for younger women. It's daunting when you show up and you're at work or at a new customer, or you're in and you've got a whole room of men that you not only have to prove that you already know your stuff, then you've got to go and do your job as well. You can't just show up and do your job. There's a double-edged sword there, but that visibility is definitely a huge thing. And I think there's I've mentioned in the chat, there's a ton of women in tech type groups, and they cover everything from, you know, women programming to cloud-based services to meetings like this, where it's the visibility of having another woman in tech, but also the support that can be provided, you know, with the learning as well. So that, as you said, Sin, I think that visibility thing is a really big thing in terms of propelling people's careers too. The most encouraging people that I've had in my tech career to push me have been, generally speaking, women. So, I mean, in the early part of my career, no, it was definitely men, because that's all I had around me. When I worked in the call center, there were 200 of us and 10 of us were women, right? So there were a couple of women there, and they were quite supportive and encouraging. But, you know, as we go on, the people who, as I've progressed, that have been the ones that have really pushed me to, you know, go for that job anyway, even if you only meet a third of the criteria, go for that role, go for it. You know, you can totally do that, and have just cheered me along. Have actually been my women colleagues. So, and I think that's totally invaluable. But they also do it with men. So it's not just a women-only cheer squad that we've got going here. And I think that could be, like, you know, really shared around. If we can encourage our peers, it's kind of infectious, because it takes that competitiveness out a little bit too, but it also pushes people to do better and be better and look at the broader scope of their careers.
Yeah, one of the non-technical women that I worked with at the Microsoft partner I used to work for, her niece's school had an issue holding on to female IT teachers. And so she brought a bunch of year 11 and 12 students from their computing class into work one day and said, here's a bunch of, you know, technical professional women. They've all said that they're happy to mentor you. Go pick one. And I know of 2 or 3 of them who've since gone into degrees in IT, started down the path of becoming professionals, who had previously thought that wasn't for them, just based on the fact that they've only ever had male IT teachers at school, which is, you know, one of those weird things, because most teachers being female, but then also most IT folks being male, that's one of the spots where you tend to see that normality broken, but still heavily male influenced, unfortunately. I mean, you know, they're not all bad, but it's always nice to have some representation, especially at such a formative point in your schooling. I know my high school couldn't keep an IT teacher at all. That's because I went to school in the middle of nowhere, but you know, even having anyone with a passion for it is better than nothing. But particularly when you're already feeling, you know, like your kids, Sonia, that push away from the tech space, just being able to have someone that you can easily connect and communicate with who's going to push you to do that stuff, really important.
And I think it comes down to that phrase, you can't be what you can't see. If you can't see it, you can't aspire to do it. So getting that visibility and getting more women sort of going into schools that are saying, look, you can do this. If it's something that interests you, do it. It doesn't matter if the only people you've ever seen before have been guys. I'm doing it. It's fine. Yeah. And I think the more we get that, but I think a lot of women, they don't go back. They don't go back to where they were to try and bring some of those either more junior women or even going back to schools. And I think that's where we need to spend a little bit more time when we're looking at building that career path.
Definitely need to share our stories of how we got into IT as well. Like, these kind of events are so valuable. But then going back to the people who are in that situation that you were in when you were younger, and going and encouraging them to keep going. Like, I remember I was the only woman and the only person actually in my year 12 class who was taking IT. So I had to do it by distance through a different school because my school didn't offer it. And so I had all these free periods in my school calendar where I would just be sitting there studying IT by myself. But I wish I could go back and promote that to my school and other people who might be feeling discouraged just because it's not there and the school, like, not enough people were interested in it. Doesn't mean you can't take it. Like, still pursue that interest and push through, make it happen.
I think we do a lot. Being at uni and never. Sorry, go.
I think we do a lot better job of that in other areas of tech than we do particularly in IT roles, because I see a lot of, you know, stories of profiles through Girls Who Code, and a lot of, like I said, again, a lot of the coding organisations and boot camps and stuff where you see people that are profiled, even to the point where there are some women in STEM initiatives around Queensland and Australia, where they are also sort of heavily weighted to the science and engineering fields as well. And we certainly need representation there as well. But this technology bucket doesn't have a lot of profiles of women who are successfully doing more infrastructure type roles, even cloud infrastructure roles. So it does seem to be a bit of a gap. That I know that we're out there. We find some amazing people, especially through these calls, but they don't seem to be the ones that have their names and lights in terms of career choices.
I think infra has always had that issue, though. It's we're in the background until it breaks.
So, why do we employ you?
Yeah,
whether it's working or not.
Yeah.
So I think, like, the cloud should make it so much easier for, like, reducing the barrier to entry in infra type roles. I think if we can go and help students to realize the power of the cloud and use cloud to start playing around with all the different components that support an application, even if at first they're playing around with applications and they realize, oh, I need something to host that, then that's a win. And it speeds up that process. They don't have to go and buy a server or anything like that to host a website.
It's definitely an advantage that I didn't have when I was first tinkering. Like, my first PC build was, when I was 12, 13 years old. We'd had an Apple IIe at home since I was about 4, but it wasn't really until I was in high school and I'd finished the alleged IT course in the first couple of weeks of year 11, and I went, now what do I do? They went, there's some bits and pieces in the server room, just go build yourself something. And I built a server and, dual booted some Linux and some Windows, and then I could go, play around with stuff without having that axe over my head of don't break Dad's computer while he's at work. If it's not working when he gets home, he'll be mad because I had, something of my own to play with. And now looking at all the cool stuff we can do for free, that just blows the minds of, like my father, whose encouragement is basically why I never felt like tech wasn't for me. Telling him some of the stuff that you can do for free in the cloud, and he's just like, that's unbelievable, for someone of his generation who grew up using punch cards and sending stuff away each week to the computer at ANU. So it's super cool getting to do so much cloud stuff, but also when I got handed responsibility for mentoring the Microsoft trainee guys that we had, and they were, both career changes. So they weren't kids; they were well into their 20s. They'd worked lots of places, done lots of stuff, but one of them didn't know the difference between a public IP and a private IP, and they're doing all this whiz-bang programming stuff at TAFE, but not a lot of the foundational stuff that we had to learn as part of this is how you have to do it to plug two computers into one another. So interesting divide.
So I am watching the clock, and I am conscious of time. We've spoken a lot about how to get into this career, spoken a little bit about getting into Microsoft, and I also put a link into the MVP program, which is worth checking out. I want to pivot this conversation now and talk about, what do you do when you've been in this industry for a while? Where do you go? What's your next step if you're getting a little bit bored in your current role? What do we think the future looks like for people in infrastructure, and where should your tech focus be? What's sort of advice for people who have been around the traps a bit longer like we have in terms of what we do next?
I think, like in my case, I went from pure sysadmin, Windows-based things doing and internet proxy kind of work, and the pivot for me was to go sideways into cybersecurity. I was burned out as a sysadmin. I don't have to go into it. I think anybody who's been a sysadmin knows what that feels like. Certain ringtones give you anxiety.
To this day.
Yeah. Yes. If there are certain ringtones that I will hear, my heart rate goes up. But it was a case of looking for things that were adjacent to what I knew, but stayed in the tech stack because, as I said, I'd had a taste of management and I didn't want to go down that path. It wasn't for me. So I think the key thing particularly is to be aware that tech is huge and you're not bound to a single technology stack. So yeah, I was on the Windows sysadmin stack, but I went sideways into cybersecurity, which was a tech agnostic view. So at that point, I touched a whole bunch of things I'd never touched before. I learned a whole bunch about like the ELK SIEM. I learned a bit about Splunk. I learned, all the different technologies in terms of the cybersecurity kind of SOC space, as well as at the same time, continuing to use some of the knowledge that I already had as a sysadmin around best practice. So I think the thing to be really aware of is to look sideways. Don't go, yeah, look, I'm burned out. I'm going to become a goat farmer. Like it's a common dream that, IT people have. It's like, I'm going to check, I'm done, goat farming. That's it.
Yeah, was living on a farm.
Some days I'm tempted. Don't tempt me too much.
I'm gonna run a dive shop in the Caribbean, and I don't dive. We talked about this, Tanya.
Books for me.
We've all got that old dream, right?
Cupcake shop.
Yeah. But there's the tech adjacent careers too. Like there's, account management, project management, those kind of things as well. Which your technology is going to help you out a ton. If you understand how things work and processes work, there's all the ITIL roles, problem management, incident management, change management, service management, all of those as well. So there's a ton of other roles out there that will use your tech skills. You don't have to give up on tech totally if you've got to the point where, no, I've had enough of this particular bit.
And as we've said, there's so many different areas within tech. So I started as a programmer. I've moved into being a DBA. I've been a sysadmin. These days I'm a cloud solution architect, which just means I architect designs in the cloud. But yeah, burnout, there's a whole lot of that around. That's why I ran away from the public service and then took an 8-month holiday, and which thank you very much to all the taxpayers for paying for that one. I appreciated it. And then when I came back in, I came back at the lower tech level again, just to dip my toe back into the working world. Because after 8 months off, having to show up to an office was hard. But yeah, so there's always something else out there that your skills will translate to. I've known librarians who became change control managers because their eye for detail was what brought them into being a librarian, and also books, because who doesn't love books? But it was that eye for detail and process that allowed them to translate into an IT career. So there's always something there that you can find. But finding the indicators of those core skills often as well.
Yeah, I went from sysadmin to ops manager and then across to application development management, and I don't know anything about software development. I tried very hard to forget Java, and the underlying technical skills of IT ops still translates really well to that understanding how to manage technical resources. So running a team of devs was much the same as running IT ops.
Yeah, and I went from, I did support, second and third level support for a while, and after doing that for a number of years and being on call for longer than I care to think about, got burnt out with that and flicked over to a project and did a long-term project for 2 years instead, and then sort of started to miss the people contact and the support stuff I was doing. So then ended up in a management role where I ultimately ended up managing a team of infrastructure people and a team of software developers, moved into service delivery management, and then changed that completely and started up our own business as a managed service provider in the SMB market. So that was a lifestyle change to carry on using my tech skills while we started a family. So, I had 2 little girls through 15, 16 years of running our own business, which came with its own challenges. But by that time, I was very ready for a gainful employment again, especially when I got talking to Microsoft about a new team they were starting in a vacancy that they might have, and my dream to one day become a blue badge. So it is interesting how you can flip and change, even staying with an infrastructure theme between the different types of work that we get involved in. It's interesting to see that, that the myth that the cloud is going to get rid of all the IT pros still hasn't happened yet. We haven't had the robots come over and completely automate our jobs. And
I'll be really surprised, Sonia.
All right, yeah. I love explaining to people all of the opportunities in the cloud for infrastructure people, because there is this perception that with everything going to the cloud, I'm not going to have any servers to hug anymore. I'm not going to have any network cables, to patch it anymore. What am I going to do? Yeah, lots. Yeah. There is still lots to do in the world of cloud operations, especially when you start talking about the world of hybrid, where organizations still have on-prem workloads as well as their cloud workloads, and they're trying to figure out how to monitor, manage, provision, secure all the things. We are going to have a job for a very long time.
Yep, it's not going away anytime soon.
So I want to go back here.
Oh, wow.
Santa Monica Pier. I want to go back there.
Yeah, I recognize it. Oh, I did see an announcement from Qantas that they are looking to start up Sydney to LAX flights mid-2022. Let's see how realistic that's going to be. I told my manager I expect travel budget in FY23.
Well, I got told that I'm going to get sent to Seattle at some point, being that I'm quite new to Microsoft, and I would like to actually do that at some point. So that would be nice. Just on Simone's.
Over in the US.
Yeah, even people in Seattle aren't going to campus at the moment. So.
No. And it took me 3 years to get to Seattle after I joined Microsoft. And that was when we could fly.
Yeah, Simone's just asked, can a CIO still be hands-on or a strategy only? I think that really depends on the size and attitude of the employer. Certainly, I have been what would largely be considered a CIO, small not-for-profit, that the team was 6 people, and everyone did everything because that's the nature of a small place. But generally speaking, if you're talking about a C-suite, they're not going to be very hands-on anymore. They're much more, the buck stops with them writing the strategy and making the big picture plan for the organisation.
And in all honesty, in a lot of those organisations, if your C-level is hands-on, that to me is a little bit of a warning sign that you are dealing with micromanagers, and you want to
CIO, no admin.
You want to stay the hell away from places like that if you're seeing micromanagement coming from that high-level executive, because it probably won't be a very nice place to work.
Yeah. And I've seen that in action. Don't go there. Just don't. Just run, hide, scream.
You're right. I think it comes down to whether or not there is a level of people under the CIO who the CIO is relying on for technical advice and strategy and how things are running, or whether or not the CIO is still expected to be the one driving decisions and recommendations and architecture, where you're going to need to be a little bit more hands-on for you to understand the concepts and the new technologies to then go and recommend them and get them implemented in the business. It really does just depend like you said, what the scope of the role is, and usually the size of the org. Oh. Awesome. I think that brings us close to time. I'm going to leave you with a few events. Our next call is the 30th of September, which will be here faster than we know it.
Every time.
Yes, last Thursday of the month, we will come up with a topic idea between now and then and catch you then. Same bat time, same bat channel. And they've just officially announced the dates for Microsoft Ignite. So Microsoft Ignite is US dates the 2nd to the 4th of November, of course, with the time zone and the dateline differences. That means it's the 3rd to the 5th of November for us. Lots of stuff that gets repeated in our time zone, lots of recordings that are also available for you to watch on demand, especially now that we are going into a more virtual world. So I will throw a quick link in the chat to myignite.microsoft.com for you to go and register for this free event to catch all of the technical goodness and some marketing spin coming out of everything. Sorry, marketing information. Really edit that one out of the video. So yes, come join us for Ignite in November, which probably means that we will make our November call a Microsoft Ignite wrap-up / highlights package. So there you go. We've got November locked in. So I just want to thank everybody for joining. Jess, do you have anything else to close us out?
No, I'm really stoked with the number of stories we've had today, and that people have been able to share that there isn't a right or a wrong way to get into an IT pro career. It doesn't really matter which way you fall into it. If it's something you really love, if it's something you're passionate about, just go and do it.
Even if it just seems like a good idea at the time.
If it doesn't work out, just go do something else. Right?
Yeah.
You know?
Become a llama farmer.
Yeah, we put way too much pressure on ourselves to make a good decision, like every single time. Yeah. Like sometimes you just need to go do something and learn as you go, and then if you don't like it, just change it. Like nothing's unchangeable.
Yep.
Including hair color.
It is a great way to wrap up. Thank you so much to everybody for sharing, for joining us in the chat. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next month.
See you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.